A warm welcome to this week's ORT, where the panelists have the pleasure of discussing the Black Renaissance.
Organize, sit down, reason and talk.
So, welcome to this week's ORT, where I am joined by our resident panelists, Ebony Harmony, Kindred Spirit, and Brother S, and I'm the host, Kush. And today we're looking at the Black Renaissance in the United Kingdom. And I think we could actually say the United States and Canada, because it was quite prominent there, as well as Germany and so forth. And we're looking at the legacy of those years where there was ardent support for the African cause or the black cause, whichever way you want to look at it. So we're going to kick off with a quiz today, and I'll have you know that the prize for today's quiz is a 2 weeks all-expensive paid holiday in Malibu. Yes, we're crowdfunding that. So you could shout out, or you can not shout out if you don't know the answer. So, who sung the song saying the word, "I'm black and I'm proud"?
James Brown.
Well, in there, that's one for Team Brother S.
Indeed.
Which radical thinker is associated with the saying, "by any means necessary"?
Malcolm X.
Oh, yes, you won't go to there, even though Brother S picked you to the post again. Listen, he's got a tracksuit on. He's got a tracksuit on. He's ready for this one. Okay, we'll get a bit tougher now. Who said this quote? "Chance has never satisfied the hope of a suffering people." Chance has never satisfied the hope of a suffering people.
Garvey.
Exactly.
Come on.
He's gone.
in there.
He's 3 lengths ahead. Okay. So, who said this quote then? "Critical in the history of white supremacy was the decision not to control black and other women of color, but to control the men of color."
That sounds like... Hang on. What's his name?
It's a female.
Ooh, that's just from.
Oh, yes. This is a curveball.
From me then.
The clock is ticking 5. The clock is ticking 4. No. The clock is ticking 3. You're going to kick
Francis
yourself.
Presley. My goodness me!
Let's just go.
Team Brother S is actually stalling away with this one.
Noted that he's sitting next to the quizmaster, looking over his shoulder.
Conspiracy.
As we can see, the legacy is intact. So who said this one then? Who's this quote from? "When you don't educate your children to confront the problems that we or us face, they are miseducated." When you don't educate your children to confront the problems that we or us face, they are miseducated.
Carter Woodson.
Nope. His first name, I'm going to give you a clue. His first name, the first letter of his first name begins with A. Clearly that clue is no good. Clock's ticking 5. Clock's ticking 4. Clock's ticking 3.
Abraham Lincoln.
Clock's ticking 2. No. Clock's ticking 1. Dr. Amos Wilson. Of course. So countries and continents now. We've moved away from personalities.
Okay.
Choice of 3 here. Who ran the Underground Railroad in the United
Harriet
States?
Oh, so we can interrupt. Yeah? Choice of
Pull
3.
it down. Pull it down.
Okay.
We all knew that one. Just,
Someone's going to Malibu, I think. I wonder who that is.
What that trip is.
So, all right, question. What is the last name of African freedom fighter whose name begins with, first name is Steve?
Pico.
Oh, well said. Well said. Question. Which African country first embarked on which European country first embarked on African slavery?
Belgium.
Nope.
Portugal.
Nope. Ah, yes. It was the Portuguese. They were the big seafarers. Okay, heading back to the United States. Which country, I've told you which country it was, but you can tell me who is this person in this country. Which country does the real McCoy originate, and what was he?
Oh. Well, we know it was the US and McCoy was.
Clocks are ticking.
Can you ask the
Fine.
question? Ask the question again.
Which country does the real McCoy originate from, and what was he?
What was he?
Yeah.
Was he was either an engineer or a carpenter, wasn't he?
Very
And
close.
there was a tendency to copy his work.
Very
Just
close.
as a certain part.
Exactly.
So as a way of authenticating
That's the
it,
real
people would
McCoy.
ask, is it the real McCoy?
Exactamente. His name is Elijah McCoy,
Alright.
born May the 2nd, 1844, died in 1929. He was Canadian-born inventor, engineer, of African descent. And there you have it. So our team really, the legacy is intact. That would be the kind of stuff,
Well
you know.
done, brother.
When you get to Malibu, there's this
Fly
nice
in the
little,
flag.
there's this nice little cafe.
Brother S, fly in the flag.
Yeah, it's Ryanair though. Yeah, so you can only carry a bag of rice. Yeah, anything bigger than the small 1 kilo bag.
We used to stop off at Italy first.
Yeah.
Rona.
Then Calcutta.
And the person in the next seat might not be too pleased to be
Yes,
sitting next to you.
yes. And you have flown a plane before, have you?
Question, brother. Still want to go?
I might pass on it this year.
Oh dear. So yes, the Black Renaissance. I remember it as being a period when there was so much hope, coupled with energy, youthful, black, conscious, loving energy and hope. And somehow in the 90s, it just seemed to dissipate, unless I'm wrong. What's your recollections on the Black Renaissance? We even got Lee Jasper into the town hall, into government, to work with the London mayor.
But you know, there's so much that there are two things that really jump out that I have a feeling about.
Okay.
One of them was Spike Lee.
Oh my
Yeah.
days.
And I remember a time when a Spike Lee film coming out was a big
It was
deal.
massive.
And I don't think there was any Spike Lee film that I went to see with anything less than a group of
That
people.
wasn't a group event,
Yeah,
yes,
yeah.
exactly.
It wasn't a date movie, it was you went with a group.
Yeah.
And afterwards you were going to go somewhere to
Yeah.
reason.
To debrief.
And that was always, so a Spike Lee film coming out was really anticipated, and then regardless of whether or not the film was
Yeah.
much caught, but there was always going to be a discussion
Yeah.
about it.
Yeah.
So it was going out with a group of people like me to see that film.
Mm.
The other thing is Terry McMillan.
Okay.
And you know, all the fuss was about waiting to exhale, right? But the real deal was actually Disappearing Acts.
Yes.
Because Disappearing Acts was the first book that I saw men and women both reading.
Yeah.
And it was a relationship book.
Yeah.
And I remember talking to brothers about that book. Because even though it was written by a woman, a lot of them felt that the male character was actually quite
Yeah.
well.
They could identify
Yeah.
with him.
So it generated a lot of conversation at that time. When I don't know if any other book that we were both reading, but it was about us. So my discussions with about that book and about relationships were based on that book, but amongst us. There weren't conversations that we're having with people, you know, white people.
Yeah, yeah.
It generated conversations amongst us.
Yeah.
Like that. So those two things really jump out. But there was a lot of stuff. It's like we were riding a wave,
Oh yes.
and there was an energy
Yeah.
around as well.
Yeah.
And just the conversations you'd have with people in the bookshops.
Yeah.
You'd be looking at one thing and the person next to you is looking at something, and somehow
Yeah. You'd
you
connect.
get talking about
And the marches, You know, African Liberation Day used to be something that we all kind of marked in our calendars. We used to support local businesses as a result of that. But like I said, for some reason in the 90s...
But it's interesting because my recollection of that time, like you said, it was a bit of a crest of a wave. And my earliest memory is when I was like 16 going to youth clubs, and that was my earliest awakening of black consciousness. Because around that time the classes were led by young black people. I remember Victor Romero Evans, he used to do a dance class, dance class down at youth club office somewhere. And I always wonder watching him in amazement through the window and thinking, wow, it's quite amazing, because very little, it wasn't often you'd see a black leader of sorts, you know. And as that progressed, Rastafarianism featured heavily in my black consciousness and awareness and so forth, and you know that was a real core to my life. And I was in school, and my routine was after school I'd then go to Head Start in West Green Road, the bookshop there, and look at the books there, and I'd save money and buy some of the books there and have some reasoning with I can't remember his name.
I can remember his customer service.
Yes, very serious,
which was very much wanting.
But for me, that was like, that was quite a wonderment. Those books and that place that you know really I could relate to everything I saw in the pages of the books and read and so forth. And as I got older, sort of like 18, 19, there were buildings on the high street that had sort of like closed their businesses, but it was then a space that other organisations could use. And there was RUZ, Rasta Universal Zion, it was quite a very big building. They'd have music classes, they'd have discussions, they'd have classes where sisters would talk and reason and stuff. So it was a whole community in this one building that I used to frequent regularly. So it was a real positive awakening, real consciousness. It gave some real strength because it was quite wide among
the remit.
And I could go to 90% of my friends and they speak the same language as me, have the same mindset as me. You know, it was very empowering. But like you said, it seemed to slowly disappear. And for me, in my mind, immediately, I kind of made that connection with the buildings being no longer available to these organisations. And so, I can see it, I feel like it was slowly stripped down in that way because the availability to gather and talk became, or the opportunity became less and less in that respect.
Right. No more meeting spaces.
Yeah, that's how it feels to me, and that's how I kind of remember the youth club closed, and that building was then taken back over, and there wasn't, they didn't move to somewhere else, I think there was there was something in Brixton, and then that changed, and slowly these places were closing, or places were not made available to them. And of course at that time we didn't have the social medias that we do now, so then it was fracturing what we had more and more, I feel like.
Okay. What happened to the Black Women's Centre?
I can't remember, but again, it was that something that closed and was not, I can't remember the details of that.
But even having some place called a Black Women's Centre sounds really radical now, but we had it.
Yeah.
I think when I look back at that time, the end of the 80s into the 90s, or probably mid-80s into the 90s, there had been loads of shifts. If you think after the riots of the 70s into the 80s, when there was strong links now with black empowerment and connected to music, connected to reggae music, connected to roots and culture, which then in of itself asked people to identify, and they became strong in their conviction of their identification, who they belonged to, because they didn't want to belong to this thing that seemed to be oppressing them.
Yeah, to the man.
Right. But there were loads of movements that were going on at that time. CND, Anti-Nazi League.
Yeah, for real.
Yeah, there was political movement as well as musical movement. And those things, even in the arts, you spoke about Victor there, being part of the Black Theatre Co-op, how they as a movement progressed into being able to do their own theatre productions in makeshift places, but it was something that we could then identify and say, oh, they've got another one on.
Yeah.
There was those that came from Jamaica. You see what I mean?
Like Blue Mountain Productions.
And prior
and
to
stuff
that,
like
with my man, who's the old brother?
Oliver.
Oliver.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
So you had some connection that was coming even from overseas, where you were saying, oh, this is me. I can identify with these things. I think that those types of movements, as well as the union was still strong then, you could protest then, and you had Ken, Lyrics in Power, the GLC. You
had Bernie Grant.
So you could protest then and feel like
It's going
something
somewhere.
would be done.
Yeah.
And I think that seemed to dissipate.
Yeah.
I mean, it's interesting you say that the connectivity, because raving-wise, like Hackney for me was the center of the world. It had clubs 7 days a week, and you'd go out and you'd see your own people, and you'd feel good amongst your own people. And then the DJ would be saying something that he's heard on the news possibly, and then that may be picked up by Bernie Grant. So there was this kind of a thread that was running from raving to work to politics to our own personal lives, and then obviously we get Stephen Lawrence at some point. And I think for some reason, after Stephen Lawrence, there seems to have been a few years after, I think that's where things started to kind of change.
I think
going back to what Evan is saying about
isn't it?
having youth clubs and places where we could go, I think after that things started to fragment and we started to lose more. I could be wrong.
I think you might be onto something with that. I think the kind of like the national guilt over Stephen Lawrence, as it was played out in the media, then made certain parts of the establishment think, oh well, maybe we need to kind of
integrate this mob.
And I think there was an awareness of the energy of that wave that we were riding. And then we had Stephen Lawrence who thought, look, if we don't kind of
do something now,
so let's bring some of them in the house and try and like diffuse.
Yes,
this
remember there were more riots at that time.
Yeah.
Also.
Yeah.
And you think about Jarrett.
Yes.
Cynthia Jarrett.
Yeah.
You think about Broadwater. All of those things would have been impacting the system, thinking, hey, we need to pacify or get hold of this before we lose all control, because there seem to be a major uprising.
But don't we have more riots now? Well, we have less riots, but we have more killing. And if you look at some of the police shootings, there's no kind of mass crowd response. And I think, I'm going to even speak for myself here, sometimes when I see some people stopped on the street, I'm hesitant to get involved with the police stopping, because I'm even double thinking.
And I think that there's a point there, because the system changed, but not necessarily really for us. That's why I feel like it's a bit of a pacifier when you say about Stephen Lawrence as well. So the system changed. They appear to change in terms of apparently having some impact on them, and then feeling like they need to do something. And, Doreen was given a datehood or what have you. It's another discussion. But at the same time, the message was strong, that actually leaving us with a feeling that, okay, if we see something, we stand as far back as possible, because their response to us was just so
over the top and so impactful in such a way that we couldn't afford to lose our jobs. We could just about get insane jobs because of the nature of who we are. So you're really hesitant to get involved. There really wasn't any kind of response to police brutality or murders or what have you. I think we're a bit more cautious in terms of how we get involved. And because, as I guess, subconsciously, because we know there isn't a foundation like we used to have, who's then going to support us and help us in our struggle if we get involved and then kind of like, vilified or in a way that we then become a criminal by default, because we don't have our foundation, we don't have our backing, we don't have groups that we can go to,
you know, everything is so fractured that you're pretty much on your own and become a headline, and maybe not even a headline because people forget things so quickly as well. You know, there isn't that response.
What chipped away at that foundation, though, I think, is this. There's been this drip feeding about what the problem is and where responsibility for the problem lies. And I think back in that 80s to 90s period when we were we were very clear.
Yes.
You know, there was no doubt about we can see things.
Listen, I could hear other people shouting at the TV during the Stephen Lawrence trial. I could hear people nationally, black people cursing the same words I would be cursing.
And then what's happened is there's been this kind of flip, and the lens has been turned back on us to say, well, actually, you lot are the problem. Yeah. And you lot need to be, you know, you can't really trust each other because, you know, you lot are the ones who are causing all of this. So, and somehow we've internalized a lot of that. So now, and who was I listening to? It might have been Les Henry here, who was saying that the face of, if you ask the average black person in the street who they feel their enemy is or who it is they need to fear, if you'd asked that question back in the 70s, what they would have described is probably a white man, cropped hair, DMs,
or the police.
Or the police, But gradually, the perception of who you need to be afraid of has changed, and nowadays they're more likely to say somebody who looks like them.
Yeah,
you're going to cross the road from somebody who you think you're all right, actually.
But is that because we haven't stuck to the algorithm of what that black consciousness was about, which was quintessentially teach your children in your home first?
I think part of it is that, but I also think part of it is subliminal messages and social construct. I don't think any of this has happened by accident. I think it's been constructed to be as such.
But wasn't it foreseen by the thinkers of the time? They would tell you, whether it's about culture vultures or other types of writers or speakers, they were telling you actually what the modus operandi is. Because even if you read about Marcus Garvey's life now, you say, wow, that sounds like yesterday. You won't be reading it thinking, oh, that was another time.
But there lies the point, isn't it? It takes us right back to where we started. Because if you're not reading or if you're not part of a group that's having those discussions and, you know, then you're not going to get that message. You're then easy then, I guess, to be brainwashed, for want of another word, and believe what the media's feeding you, believe what's in the workplace. I mean, you know, and the headlines about black killing black, and it is happening, but then that's not looked at in its finest sense, and I'm not excusing it, but it's more than just black on black killing. We've got drugs, how do they get there? You've got everything else, the opportunities.
But again,
right back to them being thrown into, you know, crews, etc., excluded from school, so it's a bigger...
But what role, we can only control we can't control the media.
No.
We can't control Netflix and whatever they want to do.
Absolutely.
But part of the legacy should have been that we should have a generation of adults now who can turn around and say, Paul Boga, my son knows about him. My son knows about Marcus Garvey. My son knows about Francis Cress, because I make sure I taught them.
So even if they do know about them,
I'm not confident we are there. So I know everything else is happening within the environment, TV and radio. But I'm saying as a legacy, where are we in terms of saying, actually, I was at that march and I make sure that my big daughter should know X, Y, Z, and she read this or she go to that, blah, blah, blah. When she gets big, if she don't want to follow it, it's her business.
And there it is.
But I taught her.
There it is.
So we have to take some responsibility for that. Right now, we have to take some responsibility for that. Right? We can't separate ourselves from those young people out there who are killing themselves right now. We cannot.
No, absolutely not.
But as you alluded to, I think that the social construction has been designed very well, and it's blindsided some of us to the point where now, when you're looking to speak to reach some of these younger people, they're unreachable. When they look in the eye, you can see they don't even bother with me. You don't know what I'm on. And so some of them, I think one of the scariest things you ever do to see is when somebody looks at you and they're hopeless.
Yeah.
Isn't that then the reason to try? Even if it looks like don't even bother.
Okay, so you might be able to try. You might be able to try, but it takes a. If they've reached a point of hopelessness, it's going to take a lot of unraveling. You can't do it piecemeal. You can't do it as an aside. It's going to be investment. We have to invest our time. We have to go, instead of talking about it after the fact at funerals, where we're all being reflective about his so-so daughter and his so-so son and the poor thing, and he wasn't in it, as far as I know, he wasn't in that thing there, but he's still a victim of it, and that means his family and the perpetrators have all died and suffered as a result of what's taken place of the loss of that life.
Yeah, I agree with that. I'm also thinking just on a day-to-day community-minded, takes a village to raise a child perspective, and I mean just conversation in passing, and that conversation with purpose, and that purpose maybe just looking in the eye and smiling, and maybe complimenting that actually this is a really good conversation, or where you have to know actually whatever, finding something within that person, whatever short space of time, and leaving them with some sort of positive feeling.
Yeah.
And I really agree that it takes a long time investment, but I think anything small,
but
a piece of all of us.
But are we living it? Because there's a generation now who did grow up then, during the Renaissance, who are now at their workplaces, and the only place they can talk is in the toilet or some corridor. They're whisperers. They wouldn't even want to have something with Africa on their desk.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
So have we become ashamed of it? Have we become ashamed of Pan-Africanism?
Because they'll stop you in the car park, and they'll tell you about all the racism in the workplace. When you try to get them to articulate, you're trying to get them to feel emboldened and empowered to say something, and they're not saying anything.
I don't even know if it's
So what you're saying is it sounds like a big step. If they're not self-advocating, why would they reach out to the younger generation?
I don't know if it's shameless. There is something about people not wanting to be seen to be outside of the mainstream, not wanting to risk having a radical label attached to them.
Okay.
I think there's something about that, and the way that
now that they have mortgages now, the mortgages
and how you're
becomes a
raising
priority.
your child to not rock the boat,
Yeah.
to kind of not do anything to draw the wrong kind of attention to yourself. I think it's much more about that.
Okay. And that used to get on our nerves when we were
Yeah,
younger. When
right?
our parents
Yeah,
used to say,
absolutely.
"Don't get no problem."
Yeah,
If the teacher tell you so,
yeah,
and now we've kind of
Yeah.
fallen into the sun.
yeah.
To work twice as hard to be just as
We're right to be quite as
Even
good.
with that, but I don't ever remember growing up, going through my teens with a sense of hopelessness. I've never felt that.
No.
Kind of what you're describing, that you can see in some. I've never had that.
No.
So something's gone so far backwards that we're now seeing that in a way that we never saw that before.
Backwards.
Yeah, there's a disconnect somewhere that has created that.
Is it gone backwards, or have we allowed infiltration, dilution, through perhaps not being aware of the damage that social media can do early enough? And how we responded to that.
Because social media is actually, it's the force for good and it's the force for bad. But there's a whole lot of education on social media now that people can access that we never.
Well, let me pose another point here. If you go to buy yam, or green banana, or anything like that, how many places can you confidently go and you will see a young black person in there? I can find Eastern European. I can find Indian.
Everybody but, Greek, Turkey,
That must be a result of actually the home not having enough pride around blackness and black culture. That can, because there's too many of us in the city for us to say actually this is going to be a universal experience. That if you go to buy yam, you're not going to see some 17-year-old or some 15-year-old on a Saturday evening just to earn some money selling yam, green banana, jelly coconut, whatever. But you can find other nations doing it. That must be an indictment on how we pride our culture.
To a large extent, I would say. I would agree with that to a large extent. But I would also say what society has on offer for the young people, or what they're subscribed to, or what they find more attractive, or whatever's been infiltrated to them. I mean, because the social media is force of evil, force of good. You know, give it to a young person, I struggle to think they'll choose the force of good. You know, it's the glamourity and it's
Okay.
do you understand what I'm saying?
Yeah, but so universal?
Yeah.
Really?
We see it,
But we've allowed a lot of stuff to be co-opted as
No,
well.
absolutely.
We've kind of
Listen,
sold off a
We've
lot
got some
of
young people, you
ourselves to
could
the highest
give them a
bidder.
piece of yellow yam
Yeah.
pass
That's what
happening.
I'm saying.
Yeah.
Them just go and say, listen,
Yeah,
mommy,
yeah,
give me
yeah.
£3, let me go to my
Yeah.
chicken shop.
Chicken.
Yeah.
They don't want, so I'm saying
Yeah.
we really,
Or they don't want it from you.
Yeah.
If a Chinese man starts selling it next to you, they will
Yeah.
go and buy it from him.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So it's not even the value of the product, it's who
yeah.
is, it's who's promoting it.
And
So who caused that whispering?
Well, that's,
Let's figure.
yeah.
Who caused that whispering to the point where somebody makes a conscious decision, 2 shops selling the same things that are common things that we would have in our own homes, that we might ingest, that we might have as a reflection of us, and yet we would choose to bypass our own to go to the shop next door and get it from there.
Because there's this perception that has been peddled far and wide amongst our community that if you are selling it, your teeth, I'm going to be paying more
yeah.
than if he's selling it. And that persists no matter what
Yeah,
you do.
but
It used
That's
to
part
exist,
of
you
it.
see.
Yeah,
It did used to
yeah, but
exist.
hold on.
It didn't come from nowhere.
yeah, no,
I
but
know.
it does exist.
Okay.
But guess what? Jewish man have the same
Yeah.
outlook on a Jew,
Yeah.
you know.
Okay.
Indian man have the same outlook on a, but maybe there is, like we spoke about it with the relationship, there's more of a concerted effort to, I'm going to use the word drill,
Yeah.
because just to illuminate the point, to drill into the children from a very early stage. So watch out, this is what we do.
Yeah.
Mm.
Yeah.
This is what we eat.
Yeah.
If a show come out and two somebody in there look like you, go watch it.
You're 100%. Because it's going to be far and few between before another production comes out. So go and support that
Right.
that one time. Yes?
Right.
We were spoiled in the 90s in that there was a plethora
Yeah.
of things entertainment things that you could go and see, from R&B to reggae.
I'm just going to put a point in there. You said we were spoiled. We were also, and I'm going to say it for what it is, I think one of the problems is we don't have enough nasty white people. I call you knickknacks in the street. I want to beat you up. Because when you get in your ass boss,
Right? That strengthens you. Yeah.
remember me, I tell you, you're going to see me from a mile for help you.
Yeah.
Yeah.
When you see me not getting your ass boss, your Mercedes, Benz and your fancy shoes, it comes before me.
Okay.
Yeah. That's true.
So in effect what you're saying is we need to suffer some more.
We need somebody to lick with a stick.
Okay, we need to
But
suffer.
that's true, and we've seen some high-profile examples of that. They come running back to the community when they start burning, crossing their back garden, don't they? Suddenly,
Yeah.
yeah.
In a Clapton and Sia, wherever they live in, one black person among so much thousands white people.
So the forced, if you like, the imposed integration of us into a society for which we were dragged into, not came here by choice. And then of course some of us said, well, I've got to live here now, I'm here, and I'm marrying my children
Yeah.
here. And actually the education system back in the 60s, compared to what might have been in the Caribbean, would have been deemed
Pretty good.
better.
Yeah.
Our parents and of that ilk would have been saying that this is the motherland, and I think they would have construed it and made a perception of it for their own ends, so that they could survive in it. They didn't want to have to really. I wouldn't have thought they would have wanted to sit down there thinking they dragged us here and it's a lie.
Yeah. Yeah.
So they made of it
The best they
the
could.
best they
They
could.
did, but they held on to their culture.
Yeah.
And that's the thing, I think. We haven't
Yeah, oh,
held
yeah.
on to our culture sufficiently. I mean, because if we think about our parents when they came here, I mean, they had it the absolute worst, apart from our ancestors, yeah. They had it the absolute worst. But they held on to their culture, and they held that culture to the point where they were able to build things. Simple things like the parlour.
Yeah.
Many of our
Yeah.
parents use that partner system to buy their first house. They had to buy their cars to establish themselves.
Yeah.
And so, but that was a culture thing. I mean, I'm not sure how many people are in a partner, how many people have heard of a partner, but a simple cultural
Exactly.
thing like that
How
held
ma-
us together.
Exactly.
And help us to stay. It was an investment in ourselves. It was something that perpetrated throughout the community. Everybody understood why it was and what it was for, and it held us. It
And
was,
people
you know,
did teeth the partner money too
They
sometimes.
do, but we kept going.
I mean, and another cultural facet, another indicator of how far we've drifted is our house names. I couldn't tell you nobody who have house name now. Because we understood that it was out there and it was in here. In here, we do things differently. You have a different name. Oh, let them stop you. Your name such and such. You go to school, you tell them such. Yeah, so your name is
Right.
full stop. So that's just an indicator of how far we've kind of drifted, I think. Kind of in a sleepwalk sense. You know?
Absolutely.
We need a
Yeah.
new Renaissance.
Oh,
We need
yes.
the Adventists to start it again.
We're starting it here.
And where do we?
Right.
Oh, okay, we're starting.
We're starting it here.
Well, let's
with-
start in here.
In the Marcus Garvey
Yeah.
Library of all places.
We are.
Boom, bang. So, final words. I mean, what would you do differently after this discussion?
I think let my culture speak, literally,
Okay.
not just let it function quietly. You know, I have a Jamaican key ring. Maybe at work I'll have something that functions
Okay.
more.
Yeah.
Um,
Be more visible.
yeah, outside of my home, let it be more visible.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Kindred.
I would like to reconnect with a lot of that stuff that was so kind of live for me back then. I've still got all the books.
Yeah.
But I don't know when was the last time I actually went back and said, right, let me really.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
and just at the start of this discussion with the quiz makes me realise actually what stuff I need to go back and get my information
Yeah.
straight. So
Yeah.
yeah.
I feel a bit sad, actually. I feel a bit sad that I'm looking back at those times. They were fantastic.
Wasn't
it?
Fantastic
What?
times. And
Oh.
I'm looking back, I'm looking here now, and it's a bit of a mishmash. I don't know if that mishmash then is reflective of us. Are we a bit of a mishmash?
Mm-hmm.
Because I've stood for something then.
So what you got to do differently after today, do you think?
Well, a bit like Sister Kindred, I might have to dust off some of them Terry McMillan,
Yeah.
Mama Ann, and I do like a good read, and it might take me back there. Having said that, I don't know that that's good enough. I also need to be forward thinking and progressive. I've just got to wear it.
Okay, exactly, isn't it?
I'll just go wear it.
Yeah. I will say, for me, I think I've bought a lot of books which are on Kindle, but I also have some which I don't have on Kindle. And it's really interesting when you're reading a very powerful book by a black writer on public transport and somebody sees it. For both black and white, because black people connect with you when they see the cover. So I'm going to do more of that, as well as obviously on social media with people. Suggest more things. When they start to gossip, just refer them back to something which is probably more helpful to
Yes.
read or check out or YouTube or whatever.
Yes.
So yes, thank you all for your contributions today.
Thank you.
And yes, we'll bring it to a close. Thank you.
Included below are related links to this discussion. Please share, comment, and subscribe. And remember, talk the thing.
Organize, sit down.